We're getting underway with holidays and maybe some of you are going away, which would be pretty awesome. Most of you know that I'm sort of in the midst of study this year, and right now I'm in the midst of assignments, so there is no holidays at all for me. I think I have assignment due in about 2 weeks, and then another one in the week after that. But recently I've been studying about human development. And as I've been studying about that and the human lifespan and the different stages that we go through, something that has struck me is how there are some cultures which have quite an individualistic mindset, whereas there are other cultures that are not like that at all. And as I've been looking at that, it's really struck me how we do have some people that are brought up very much to be very independent and very much think of themselves and their own success and what they're going to do, whereas in other cultures, it's not like that at all. In other cultures, it's all about the part they play in a wider picture, that it's not about themselves, that it's about how do I interact with everybody else in my family or in the group of people that I'm with. In fact, some of them don't even have language that would explain what an independent mindset would be like, because it is so foreign. That is not what it's about for them. And as I was reading that, I thought, wow, for them, it's not about just look after yourself and she'll be right. For them, it's about what is my part to play in this bigger picture? How does what I'm doing today affect those people around me? And for them, it's all about relationships. And I just really feel like we need to kind of have our eyes open to the importance of relationships, the different ones that we have going in our lives. And, in Ecclesiastes 4:9, it says, two are better than one. If one falls down, the other can help him up. But to do this, we need to actually be aware of who's beside us that might be falling down, right? Actually have our eyes open that we're like, wow, they're not doing so good right now. How is it that I can help them at this time? So also Paul encourages the people of Corinth to make room in their hearts, to make room in their hearts. And I want to encourage us today that we would be challenged to make room in our hearts, that we would expand our hearts and make our hearts greater for the people that are around us and that we encounter. This morning, the title of my message is Strengthening Relationships. Strengthening relationships. And I was thinking this might sound a bit basic. We're going to talk about relationships. We're going to talk about friendships and how to have really good ones. And I thought, well, this could sound quite basic. But then I thought, the reality is if we get this wrong, the flip side of it is that we can feel very, very lonely and we can feel very isolated. And it's not a great place to be in. And with the issues that we are facing, especially in our nation around mental health and around anxiety and depression, I think it's really important that we take some time to look at how do we build good, strong, healthy relationships right across the generations, so that when tough times come, people know that they are not alone and that there is support for them. And I want to point out this morning that often the ones who are really struggling are often not the ones that we might think they are. They might be the ones that are standing here on a Sunday morning smiling, serving on the door, giving you your coffee, up on the band. They're just everyday people that can come along and seem okay on the outside, but actually on the inside, they go home and then feel very, very lonely and very isolated. We need to look out better, I believe, for those around us and to ask questions and to say, how are you really going? How's your mental health? We need to get better with developing real friendships. And so this morning, if you want to turn, if you've got your Bible or you've got your device, if you want to turn this morning to 1 Samuel chapter 18. And we're going to look at an excellent example of what strong friendship looks like. And when we start a friendship, we plant a seed. We plant a seed of friendship. And we don't know what that seed is going to grow into. We don't know what that is going to look like in the future and how that's going to develop and what that might mean for our lives or for the other person's life. But I want to say this morning, may we not miss the seeds of friendship that are being sown. May we not kill off the seeds of friendship before they even have time to grow. May we not neglect them. May we not give up on them, but may we nurture them. So we're going to have a look now at the life of David and Jonathan. And this is just an awesome, awesome insight into a great friendship. So backstory here in 1 Samuel 18, David has just defeated Goliath, and David has just come to meet with Saul. He's talked with Saul, who is Jonathan's father. And we read from verse 1, it says, "After David had finished talking with Saul, Jonathan became one in spirit with David, and he loved him as himself. From that day, Saul kept David with him and did not let him return home to his family. And Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as himself. And Jonathan took off the robe he was wearing and gave it to David, along with his tunic and even his sword, his bow, and his belt." From this very, very first moment is where we see the first seed of friendship being sown here. And all it was Jonathan listening to a conversation that David was having with Jonathan's father. And something caught within his spirit, and he thought, man, there is something about this guy that is different. There is something about this guy that makes me want to be his friend and want to get in behind him and support him. And so he does that. He lays down these items which represent his own authority and makes a covenant with David in this place. And firstly, to have a strong friendship, the first point this morning is you must be secure in who you are. You must be secure. You know, many would have been feeling really threatened by meeting David that day. David had just defeated the giant that nobody else could. And, you know, Jonathan had probably been he was standing there wearing his armor. He probably had the flashiest armor out of everybody because he was the king's son. But he didn't go out there and try and defeat Goliath. He had stood back. But he didn't beat himself up about that. He didn't feel insecure about that. He just looked at David and thought, wow, God has anointed this man, and there is something incredible about this man's life. He saw who God had made David to be and was secure enough to see him as the future king, which was the very thing he could have stepped into one day himself. And I think being secure in who we are is vital when it comes to meeting people and having good friendships. And I remember when I first met Claire many, many moons ago, we were about 22 years old, and it was on a Sunday morning at church here at the river. Well, not here at the river, because back then we met in a school hall. And we'd had the morning service, and we got chatting after church. And I remember there would be like chairs between us. We were in different rows, and we were talking. And I was asking Claire about herself, and I mean, Claire just so friendly and chatty and vivacious and full of life. And I was very shy and much quieter. And as Claire was sharing with me the things about the things she loves and the things she's passionate about, the things she would love to do, things like would love to be involved in ministry and seeing young people be all they could be and reaching out to women and all these things. As she shared these things, I thought to myself, but they're the things I really want to do in my life. And there was like this insecurity in me of like, well, this is a bit strange. She's articulating all the things that I would love to do, but I'm too scared to say. And there was a big difference there. And I remember there was just this moment of like, how am I going to respond to this? Am I going to let my insecurity just like take over this moment? Or am I going to put it aside and be willing to give a friendship a go? And I'm really glad that I gave a friendship a go, because we ended up being really good friends and ending up getting to do ministry together and ended up having our kids grow up together and all these amazing things. But I didn't know back then in that moment that there was a little seed of friendship, and how I was going to respond out of my insecurity was going to matter as to whether or not we would have a future together or whether I would let that insecurity kill it. I could have easily missed a friendship and become bitter in the process if I'd let my large insecurities get in the way. And I wonder how often we miss out on relationships and friendships because our insecurities get in the way. You know, this can happen with romantic relationships as well. You know, often I'm talking to single people and they talk about this awesome person they've met, but they don't feel maybe that they're quite awesome enough for that person. And so what do? You step back, don't you? Because you think, well, I'm not going to go there because I might get hurt in the process. But I want to encourage you, don't let insecurity get in the way. Like, go out for coffee with the person. Go on some dates. You know, when you date someone, doesn't mean you're going to, have their children. It's like there's a few more steps to go, people. But like, be friendly. Give it a go. Don't let the insecurity hold you back. Jonathan, in this moment, he saw in David a great friend, and he saw that he would be king one day. And he lay down his insecurities, he lay down his authority to make this friendship work. And in the process, he became David's greatest support. My second point this morning is be prepared for unlikely friendships. Despite their differences, despite their age gap, God knew that David needed a Jonathan in his life for the things that he was about to face. And here came this unlikely friendship. David was a shepherd, but Jonathan was a prince. David had fought with a stone, Jonathan had a sword. David had grown up in the fields, Jonathan a palace. David was the youngest of 8 boys, and Jonathan was the oldest and in line to inherit the throne. Yet God saw to bring these 2 men from different lives together to become the greatest allies. Don't miss God friendships because of preconceived ideas. Don't look at people and go, oh, they're a bit old, or they're a bit young, or they're in a different stage of life than me. Don't let that get in the way. God will surround us with people that we will never expect that we will become friends with. Even people that you might look and think, man, I'd really love to be their friend, but it feels impossible. About 20 years ago, I remember sitting in a particular place, and there was this woman speaking. And I thought to myself, man, I'd really like to get to know her. Like, she just seems amazing. That would be incredible. But I thought, well, that's never going to happen, because she was like, a big person. Do you know what, like, a big person is? You know what I mean by that? They seem really important, and me not so much. And so I was like, that's probably not going to happen. And so I just began praying for her. Not praying she'd be my friend, because that's a bit desperate, right? That's a bit weird. Please, God, please, Lord, let her be my friend. No, it wasn't like that. I just started genuinely praying for her out of care for her. And then amazingly, conversations just started happening. And then we started going out for coffees together, and then we had lunches together, and then there were holidays, and then there were conferences. And before I knew it, it was like, man, we have a really strong friendship. We really care about one another. But I never would have believed 20 years earlier, sitting there, that that would have ever happened. But God opens up doors, and God brings about these unlikely friendships. Jesus had unlikely friendships. He gathered around him 12 men who you would never think should be the hand-picked ones to be Jesus' friends. They were all really, really different. Jesus cared so deeply about his disciples and his friends. When Lazarus died, it says he wept. He knew how to have a good relationship with those around him. He also was very deliberate in his friendships. He was deliberate in who he had in his inner circle and who he didn't. And we need to be deliberate in our friendships as well as to who we let in close to us. Because the reality is there are some people who will chew you up and spit you out, which sounds awful, but they are not good for you. And I think sometimes we need to take a step back and go, why do I always feel like that when I'm with that person? Why do those issues always come up? Why am I always really feeling aggro after I've been around them? They're probably not a good influence. They're probably not the one that you should have close to you. Proverbs 22, 24 and 25 says, do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. The people that you hang around with will rub off on you. And it is very important that we are careful in who we choose to have close to us. If you're wanting friendships, ask God, and he will bring along the most amazing, unlikely people into your life. But understand these unlikely people may not be people that you agree with all the time. You're not going to, and that's okay. You're not going to find someone that agrees with you on everything. You know, Pete and I, we agree on most things, but there are some things that we still don't agree on, namely politics. So we just don't talk about it. No, we do talk about it. But it's not a big issue. It's just not a big problem because there are greater things that are more important. There are greater things to focus on in our relationship. You know, I have friends that we don't agree on most major topics. We don't agree on parenting. We don't agree on theology. We don't agree on politics. We don't agree on all sorts of things to do with how to bring up our kids, how to school our kids. And again, it's never been an issue. It's never been a major because we've never made it a major. And there are bigger things that are far more important. And there's like a grace of God that goes over friendships that makes those other things not matter. You know, if you're a person that is hard to keep friends because things keep blowing up, then I'd say, are you trying to die on every mountain? Are you trying to win every argument? Because you don't need to. There are important non-negotiables you want to have in your life, and that's all good. But you don't have to be right all the time. It's all right to agree to disagree in friendships and just let things go. Unlikely friendships also come at the most unlikely times. You may not even be looking for it, and you may not even think you have time for it. But I encourage you to step out and make room for that to happen. I'm often amazed at the close friendships that I have with people that have walked through the doors here on a Sunday morning. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't know in that first meeting that there were these seeds of friendship about to happen. But it's incredible what God will do. You know, I don't know how many years ago when Marchant and Marlies came here from South Africa, and they're not here this morning, they're on holiday, so I can talk about them. I'll talk to her about it later. But anyway, normally I check, but she won't mind. When I met her, either at church or in Mum's time, you know, we got on well, but I didn't know then what God had in our future. I didn't know then that one day we'd have a conversation and we'd end up studying together. I didn't know we'd end up traveling together and sharing a motel together and having long conversations and heaps of messages when I messaged going, I don't know how to do this assignment, please will you help me? I didn't know that friendship would form and go so deep. But man, I'm so grateful. And I'm so grateful that I didn't kill it off right near the beginning because I didn't know where it was going. Keep our eyes open all the time for unlikely friendships, not just for how it might bless you, but actually what you can bring to the table, what you can bring to this friendship, and how you can add to that other person's life. When someone walks into church on a Sunday, have an open mind and think, man, well, God, what are you going to do here? I mean, maybe you might not do anything, but maybe God's like, I have got this person in your life. Maybe he brings along a younger person. He's like, this person is the person I want you to mentor. I want you to give advice to. I want you to walk alongside. You don't have to know everything for them, but you just walk alongside and go, you know what? I'm here with you. Let's do this journey together. God will do amazing things. My third point this morning is stay committed. This covenant that Jonathan made with David went beyond the good times. That covenant lasted through the highs and the deep, deep lows that they walked through. While David went on to do great exploits for the Lord, Saul became more and more jealous and more angry and decided he wanted to kill David. So Saul goes to his son Jonathan and says, Jonathan, I want you to kill David. Now this is like a major predicament, right? Like what is Jonathan to do? Does he obey his father, who is the king, but also is jealous and angry and bitter? Or does he stand by the man that is his deep, deep friend that he has made this covenant with? You know, often in life, with relationships and friendships, we will be faced with decisions that are not easy, where everyone isn't getting along. And here in this moment in 1 Samuel 19, Jonathan plays the role of peacemaker, an advocate, and he goes to his father and he stands up for David and he fights for David on his behalf. And amazingly, Saul listens and agrees not to put David to death. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And as I thought about that, I thought, man, peacemakers are the most beautiful things, because peacemakers bring peace into a situation, like we prayed about in our prayer point this morning. Peacemakers bring peace, and when we bring peace, that is a fruit of the Spirit. The fruit of the Holy Spirit of God. When we bring peace into a situation, we bring God into a situation. And when God's in a situation, then it's incredible what will take place. We're called to be peacemakers. And in this situation, peace was made, but it doesn't last long. And Saul is back to being angry and jealous and bitter, and he decides to go after David again. So then Jonathan warns David, and then he goes back to his dad to defend him, and then Saul goes for his own son Jonathan and tries to kill him. And man, it's amazing what happens, when we align ourselves with the truth, with what is right. People can respond badly, and we can't control how other people will respond, but we can control how we respond in return. And so for David, here he is in this valley moment, and he's hiding, and the world must have fought against him. But Jonathan still goes back to him. Why does he do this? He does this because Proverbs 17:17 says, "A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for times of adversity." And here the friendship has spanned years and years and years. And Jonathan could have walked away when things were tough, but he didn't. He stayed and he remained committed. How are you at staying and committing in your relationships? How are you when things are tough and there's times of conflict? Do you stay? Do you remain steadfast as a friend, or do you run because it's too tough? Often there are people that just go from friendship to friendship to friendship to friendship, and they just let go the moment it gets tough. That is not the way of God. This morning we were praying, and I just felt like, God, you are so faithful. We have a faithful God. He doesn't run when things get tough with us. He doesn't leave us when things get hard. He hangs in there with us. He's committed through the good and the bad. And this is what Jonathan was like. Don't give up on relationships, even when distance separates you. There'll be times when there might be physical distance that separates you. Maybe you've come here from another country, or maybe your family have moved to another place, and there's distance there. I want to encourage you, don't let the distance ruin your relationship or ruin your friendship. There is a great ways these days that we can stay in contact and stay close. When our kids were young, I had a really good friend who lived in another city. Well, I still have her as a friend, actually. It wasn't had. I have a friend, and she lived in another city. We've never lived in the same city, but we are such close friends. And it was amazing when the kids were young, every time we went through a difficult time, for some reason, suddenly she needed to be in Auckland. Like God just orchestrated it somehow. And she'd need to be here for study or for business. And she'd message me, she'd be like, Annika, can I come and stay? And I'd be like, yes, come and stay. We're going through this big crisis, and she'd be right there at that exact moment when I really needed someone to sit with me and pray with me through a tough time. And then we might not see each other for 3 years. And then something else might happen, and suddenly, by chance, she'd message me and say, oh, can I come this week? I'd be like, yes, come this week. God is amazing how he doesn't let distance get in between friendships. We need to keep nurturing them and valuing them. And David and Jonathan did this. My fourth point this morning and last point is we need to speak truth. This friendship of David and Jonathan continued on, and in 1 Samuel 23:15-18, we read here how Saul is still pursuing David, and it says, while David was at Horesh in the desert of Ziph, he learned that Saul had come out to take his life. And Saul's son Jonathan went to David at Horesh and helped him find strength in God. Don't be afraid, he said. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be a king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. Then Jonathan went home, but David remained in Horesh. Jonathan went to him, and he helped David find strength in the Lord. That is one of the key things that we can do in our relationships and our friendships. Sometimes we can't change situations for our friend. We cannot change the circumstances. We cannot take away the illness they're facing. We cannot change the situation with their children that they're going through. We cannot create a job for them to have. But we can go and we can encourage them and we can point them to the Lord who will give them strength in that time. We can go and help strengthen them. And sometimes we might go there and we don't even have words to say, but sometimes just by being is enough. And Jonathan goes on and then he speaks to the very heart of David. And he says to David, "Don't be afraid. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel." He comes, Jonathan, and he speaks to the fear that David has within his heart. He speaks to that fear and he says, you do not need to be afraid. Those things that you are scared of, they are not going to happen. And then he declares over his life what God had said all along, that he will be king one day. Because sometimes when we're in the valley moments, we kind of lose sight of like the promises of God. And we need a friend that's going to come alongside us and say, the things that God said are still going to happen. They're still going to take place. You just need to believe. To be a good friend, it's about speaking truth when circumstances would say otherwise. It's about declaring God's promises and holding faith for others when they can't hold it themselves. There is power when someone stands alongside you and says, I am with you and I will walk with you through that thing. It helps you to know that you are not alone and you are not isolated and you will get through this. That's what true friends do. They point one another to God. And sometimes we just need to say, man, I am here and I'm not going anywhere. Because sometimes people have just had people leave them all the time throughout their life. So sometimes they just need to know, you know what, I'm going to be here. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it all better, but I'm going to be here through the tough times. Can I have the band up now? You know, throughout this friendship, it often looks like Jonathan was the one who looked out for David and protected him and watched out for him and reminded him of what God had said. Yet there came a time when the tables turned and Jonathan has now died and David is now king. And just as Jonathan said he would be, David is now in this place of authority. And in 2 Samuel 9 verse 1, David asks, is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake? And this is a beautiful moment because in this moment he finds out that Jonathan does have a son, and his son's name is Mephibosheth, and he's lame in both feet. And so David calls for the son of Jonathan to come before him. And in 2 Samuel 9 verse 7, David says, don't be afraid, for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table. Mephibosheth bowed down and said, what is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? This is how bad a place that Mephibosheth is in at this moment. He feels like a dead dog, like his life is worthless. But David speaks to him, and it's all because of Mephibosheth's father, Jonathan, that David extends this kindness to him. And I want to encourage us that our relationships and our friendships, they go beyond ourselves. In fact, they're not about ourselves half the time. They're about the next generation and the generation that comes after that. And how we live our lives right now and how we treat other people will affect our children and the next generation as well. Jonathan's son was in such a bad way, but his life got given back to him and kind of got restored because David chose to treat him like his own son. Jonathan had given up his authority to become king one day and sort of gave it up for his future generations too, but Mephibosheth got to live a life of royalty in the house of David because of how his father had lived his life. Friendships are made to outlast us. And there's some of us here who have known each other for like more than 30 years, which just makes us really old. But now our kids are friends with each other, and they do crazy things and stay out late and go on youth camps and pray for each other and support one another and spur one another on in their faith. But that happens because people stuck around and they didn't let little things become big things and kill friendships. They stuck around, they stuck together and said, man, I'm in this with you for the long haul. I pray that each one of us would be like that with the friendships that we have, that we would stay committed. We wouldn't let insecurities get in the way, but that we would look out for one another in a beautiful, beautiful way. And we'd put others before ourselves.